So I want to talk about the Michael movie and explain why this is my favorite scene in the entire film, because I think it explains Michael Jackson better than almost any other moment. Now, before I get into it, I don't know if this exact conversation happened in real life or if the Peter Pan book was actually sitting beside his hospital bed, but we do know that Michael was burned and he was hospitalized. And we also, of course, know he loved Peter Pan. But I want to talk about what the filmmakers chose to show us and how this scene plays out is so freaking dope. So check it out. So after Michael's hair catches fire from filming that Pepsi commercial, his mother Catherine visits him in the hospital. And then her and Michael have a conversation and she says something that's basically heartbreaking. I should have protected you. And that mug hit hard because the scene really isn't about him being physically burned. It's about the wound underneath it all. The burn, of course, is physical, but the deeper wound is the child who was never protected, or at least not fully. And what makes Catherine's apology so powerful is that she's finally naming the thing that's been living in her family for years. And then Michael says nobody can stop Joseph, right after he says, I really don't want to talk about this right now. But that says so much because I don't think he's angry, at least not at her. Michael's now a grown man, but he's speaking from the place of a little boy who learned early in his childhood that the most powerful person in that house, which was Joseph, could never be challenged. Michael says he wants to rest, and so then he turns his back to her, and that body language, I believe it matters. To me, that wasn't about him trying to go to sleep. It was basically emotional distance. He was protecting himself. I don't think he could fully receive her apology in that moment. That would have reopened a whole nother wound. But then he looks over at the Peter Pan book next to his hospital bed, and a tear rolls down his face. And then he gently tells her it's not your fault. And I feel like he was showing her grace in that moment because I believe Michael understood she was trapped too. And they knew Joseph was an abuser in that house and a monster, but I don't think he wanted her drowning in her guilt, but yet he was still hurt. So as a man, I felt like he forgave her, but his childhood pain was still connected. And that Peter Pan book next to his bed, it made me think of an earlier scene in the movie. There was a scene where Michael writes Joseph's name besides Captain Hook, and I immediately wrote that down in my notes because Pan is the little boy who never wanted to grow up, and Michael's story is exactly the opposite. Because of Joseph, he wasn't allowed to be a child. Joseph, the one who's standing between Michael and his childhood, because the other kids, they were doing kid stuff, and the Jacksons, they had careers, going to rehearsal, they were expected to be perfect, the music became labor, they were pressured every single day, and their childhood was basically a performance. So later in life, of course, we know that Michael builds Neverland, the estate. And a lot of people have said that Neverland is, pretty much was about Michael's escaping adulthood. But I don't think that's what the film is really showing us. To me, Neverland becomes less like escapism and more like his compensation for the childhood that was stolen. Basically, Michael building a dream over his trauma. And even during the film, I was thinking a lot about the music. I was loving it. And you think about like Off the Wall album, Thriller, Bad, etc. I feel like there's an uncomfortable truth underneath all of it. You know what I'm saying? Michael, in my opinion, being the greatest artist of all time, and yet his journey